Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service. Today I'm going to be presenting the annular eclipse, solar eclipse, that occurs on February 17th, 2026 at 7 a.m. in the morning, Eastern Standard Time. I'm looking at Washington, D.C.'s chart. With that said, I'm not going to be spending as much time on the chart of D.C. as much as I'm going to be spending time with the Sun-Moon axis and the Aries point, which affect us all. But I do want to point out some really interesting aspects of this particular chart, okay? Because it is an amazing chart. Well, it depends how you look at amazing. But it is a chart that really is going to bring public things that may have been going on internally. And I mean that especially for those people who live in the vicinity of Washington, D.C., Washington, D.C. itself. And I think that we can also say that because of some other factors in the chart, the rest of the world will also feel this. Now, it could be that things are happening in D.C. that is affecting the rest of the world. That would not be surprising. But let's look at why that would be a factor. You see here a 28-22 degree Aquarius chart. That's the arising, which by the way is ruled by Uranus. Uranus, the planet of change, also figures very greatly into this Sun-Moon axis. We'll get to that. Right now, know that the chart itself is ruled by Uranus because of that 28-22 rising. But we also have a Sun and Moon at 28-49, okay? So basically within the same degree, we have the Sun and Moon right off of the ascendant. Well, that means that how we feel emotionally and who we are is now jutted out into public domain. For the United States, that's going to mean whatever happens here, the rest of the world is going to notice. For us personally, it means that anything that we're going through that maybe we've been trying to keep under wraps or we've been trying to deal with in a private way is probably going to be coming out more publicly. That's just the dynamics of having a conjunction between the sun, the moon, and the ascendant. That it is what it is. Now, something we can't see on here, but I want us to look at it, is that 4 degrees Adamitas Gemini. Okay, so it's for Gemini, 12 minutes. Okay, and it's within what we call an orb of an angle because it's within 10 degrees. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that aspect. What I want to spend a time on is I want to talk about Adamitas. You can't see it in this software, but in Solar Fire, you can see this. And I'm not going back to Solar Fire for the simple reason that I read so much in a chart that I feel like it becomes chaotic for people who are not used to that much stuff on their wheels. The Adamitas is stationary. And just a little explanation, what that means is it's kind of stopped. So it's between the retrograde motion and the direct motion, it stops, or at least it appears to stop. When a planet, trans-Neptunian, whatever it is you're dealing with stops, it becomes extremely strong, okay? What is that going to mean for us? So what it means is that think of what Adamitas is in general. It's stoppage. It's roadblocks. It's persevering. It's remaining firm. Standing your ground. Ground literally is Adamitas. Boulders. That's why blockages. So look for those things that are happening, maybe not directly in your life, but they're going to be happening around you because Adamitas has stationed, okay? The other thing that I want to point out on this chart before I start looking at all the little tidbits we got from AI is the 17 degrees of, now I use Placidus houses, so I want to explain that before we even get started. you'll see that Poseidon is retrograde at 17 degrees, 16 minutes of Scorpio. You see that the ninth house cusp is 17 degrees of Scorpio, 41 minutes. So once again, we're within that degree of energy, or that orb is very tight. And basically what I'm going to say here is, if you think of Poseidon as propaganda, disinformation sometimes, gaslighting often, but it's also enlightenment. It's also clarity. Okay, so it's kind of funny because that's how it is with everything in astrology. It has a dark side and it has a light side. The interesting thing is Poseidon is crossing into the house of change. Okay, it's also the house of higher education. It's the house of higher thought, idealization. So it's crossing into this ninth house, philosophy, okay, justice, okay. So we see it moving into that house. But I like also where it's coming from. It's moving into that house, but it's like making a marked distinction because Scorpio actually rules the 8th house. And Poseidon is in Scorpio, even though the house itself is ruled by Venus because it's got a Libra rising or a Libra cusp. Basically, what we're seeing here is other people's crap. It could be their past. It could be embarrassing. It could be I'll get to shocking when we get to this 27 degrees of Taurus, which we'll talk about a little bit. The actuality is that I always call this the sex, drugs, and rock and roll house because it is joint resources. It is that combination of factors of, people coming together, pooling their resources and things like that. But it's also other people's crap. People who have strong 8th houses are often involved in psychology or some form of counseling. Why? Because they're dealing with other people's crap in their mind, okay? So the stuff that we're working with, okay, could be related to how these people think, what they've got going on. And it's moving. It's like saying, no, we're going to move into the next arena. But what is that, all that information that it's been able to grab? Okay, so just a few things to think about there. It is retrograde, so whatever's going on is being pondered, wondered about, theorized, and probably happens more related to the past or what happened in the past in other people's lives. Okay, but for us as a population, this Poseidon position is actually really good. And the reason why I say that is because it's sort of like a wake up. It's a little bit of a wake up, which is going to allow us to stop things. Okay? I just wanted to point that out because it's really obvious and it's very much, I look for repeatable themes in astrology. I do it whether I'm working privately or whether I'm doing something like this. And I continually talk about our evolution when I do these videos. This keeps us not only on track, but this is like doors are opening. And the doors that are opening are giving us information that's going to help us make better decisions and judgment calls moving forward. This is not, like most new moons, this is not really about starting new things. This is more about the recognition of old things that have to go. They no longer work. So it has a different kind of connotation. The other thing that I want to mention before I get to the next part is that when you're dealing with an eclipse, we've already begun to feel this. So there is nothing that I should be talking about here that you haven't seen, heard about, directly felt, or haven't seen in some movie on television. Because, by the way, a lot of ways that astrology can manifest by what we see around us, and that includes social media and the television. So I had to bring that up. So the next part of what I'd like to do is I want to move to solar fire. Wasn't going to do that, but I'm going to move to solar fire for the simple reason that if I go to the dials here, okay, to pull up our midpoints, and I'll show you. There we go. I have to literally pull out something else to show where all of the midpoints are, because they're not going to show up on this particular software. So I'm going to take us to the 90-degree dial and solar fire. Okay, so just for a minute, we'll look at the pizza pie chart, because I do want to look at stationed, just so that you can see it, that station Admetus down here in Gemini, just so that you can see that. I also like to point out that, once again, the charts are slightly different here. So that is something that, and now it puts it right on the ascendant, but from the 12th. So one of the things that Poseidon might be bringing out, just because I'm going to combine the two charts here, is things that have been going on behind the scenes, things that maybe we weren't aware of. But that's not really what I want to work with here. What I really, really want to work with here is this. Okay? This is the exact place that we are looking at. And you can see the sun and the moon are right there. And they are conjunct, they're together. And we have the sun ascendant, we have Vesta Venus, we have Mars Pallas. Now, I want to point out that Mars Pallas is rather interesting because we have the Olympics going on, and so the athletes who are strategic, okay? It also could be the anger about politics, which I think is real, and I think that's out there. It could also be aggressive political action, which I think we're also seeing. But I like the fact, mostly, that it equals Hades. Look at that. This is Hades. Deterioration, it's, oh boy, bacteria, it's illness, deterioration. I'm going to be talking about that even more. So just think about things like that. If we were talking about the light side, you'd be thinking about things like history and research. Okay? So it equals, the sun and moon equals Hades. Kind of icky. Okay, so other things that we will be looking at in this picture. And I could have brought this up at the last program, which it's easier to see when I'm in the 360 dial, not as easy to see on the 90, but Uranus, which is, it's in Taurus, it's down here. Look at where Uranus is in compared to the ascendant, to the sun and the moon, and then Uranus. So it's within aspect. And if we were looking on a 360 dial, there would be a dot there, okay? So I just wanted to point that out. This Jupiter, which is running with Kronos over here, is about to separate. That's when the lights are going to really come on in the room. That's what I'm going to say about that. And that's going to be about authority figures, bad decisions, things that are going on where, let's just say that Saturn's coming. And when Saturn gets there, and it will, the chickens come home to roost. So some really cool stuff to look forward to, I think. Now, it depends. Saturn is considered a malefic, but really I call it the great teacher. I have a well-aspected Saturn. Most of the people around me do. And so I don't have those same reactions about Saturn. I like being organized and having discipline. It took me days to do this video because sometimes I can be kind of really Saturn. So the reality is that, you know, Saturn is coming, and Saturn asks us all to be accountable. One of my favorite sayings is, I believe we're here on Earth to make other people around us be accountable to their behavior, because I think that that is part of our duty. But that's me personally, because I have a strong Saturn. So that's one angle right there. Now, the angles are, and I have so I can go through it really quickly, 28 2849. That's where we are right now. What this is right here is 1349 cardinal. So let's just review that for a minute. So the 2849 is all things fixed, 2849. So that would be Aquarius, that would be Leo, Scorpio, Taurus. It equals across the way 1349 cardinal. That would be your Capricorn, your Cancer, your Aries, your Libra. Okay, that's one axis. The second a second angle of the axis actually occurs at 619. I think that's right there. I'm close. Okay, let me get there just to be exact, because I really want you to see. I like this picture, and I use this picture for something that I was doing with the asteroids, which we'll see later in the slideshow. But look at the Hades moon, the Hades sun. Okay, look at the Aries midheaven. This is what I meant by this chart. Whatever is going on, the East Coast, United States, is going to be visible throughout the world. Now, it also incorporates Saturn and Neptune. So that means that Saturn and Neptune also affect that midheaven. So that midheaven would also be included in that, okay? Whereas, no, I don't see, it's funny it's not showing up. It did. So just FYI. I'm really good at remembering stupid things like that. So here we go. So you have these influences happening in that sun and the moon axis. Okay, we're just going to refer to it as the sun-moon axis. So this is AI infused. Okay, of course I had to work with AI for 2 days to come up with stuff like between its mistakes and my mistakes. It was unbelievable. So this eclipse is identity forming. See, what's happening through this, and you're going to really hear this theme repeated, is that we're reinventing ourselves. That's what's going on right now. Okay? And basically what it's referring to is a lot of public exposure, a situation that no longer can remain hidden, personal involvement in collective events, and things that affect people directly. Okay? So we're looking at things like social structures, groups, networks, and alliances, technology, system, and institutions, which is that whole thing of that, remember that Poseidon going into the 9th house? Right there. Technology, systems, and institutions. We often think of institutions like government being in the 10th house, but it's also related to the 9th house. The future path versus outdated authority. Okay? Boy, think about that. I'm going to say it again. Our future path versus outdated authority. That's really critical right there. Okay? So we go, and they always point out, and I love this about the AI, this is not an optional thing. Okay? Not optional. Okay, so we're talking about, and I spoke about this briefly, but we're talking about things like law, ideology, belief systems. I already talked about a lot of this. International matters, I should have put some emphasis on. Courts, education, and broadcasting. So this is going to be very media-driven, very document-driven, very data-driven. This chart is about information. And you know, it's funny, remember the stoppage? That's Adamitas. That also relates to what's been stopped. Well, I can name a few things, and that's just with DC. Okay? This eclipse reframes the truth versus information. So we're getting a lot of disinformation out there, but what we really want is the truth. So what has been taught versus what is actually known. Authority figures losing narrative control. That is one of the things we will witness. Now, this could be in your own work environment, but it could also be in a government standing type position. And it's about the competing verses of reality, the alternative realities versus the real realities. So it's going to be about networks that override the hierarchies. And I think that we are all beginning to understand what that means, okay? So it goes on and it talks about there's going to be collapses of authority within governments, institutions, homeland security structures, and old power bases. Notice that they're talking a lot about the old system versus the new system. That's because this eclipse is really marking the beginning of a new system. No, it's not implemented yet. It's only that we've recognized that the old system no longer works. This is the decay of authority. It's not about reform yet, though. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure this whole thing is about reform. When you talk about the fact that on, I think it's February 20th, Neptune, which is 3 days after this, Neptune and Saturn are going to come together at 0 degrees of Aries. We can't find when that's happened before in astrology. They say maybe between 6,000 and 7,000 years ago. I have my doubts because I think even as much as 8,000 years ago, we were already practicing astrology. I think that it would have been documented, just between you and me. The problem is that Neptune is a newer planet. They weren't following it 8,000 years ago. So it is possible, but they're having a hard time finding it. Okay, so now we've got a couple of things that are happening with, like Zeus is right near the ascendant within orb, just like that Admetus was. But here we're looking at open conflicts. We're looking at power struggles that are going to be played out in public. I say that even if you're in a relationship that's not going so well, and there is going to be stuff that shows up, I believe, with Juno at some point in this, you're going to realize that that's not going to stay private anymore. If you're having problems with a spouse, I think it's going to become more public. There's an us versus them dynamics that is continuing to escalate during this time. And it's creating it's what they call it is raw force plus strength plus pressure. And that plays out because we also have a Pluto Volcanus direct. They're together, okay? In the 90-degree dial, they're smack on. This is going to be dominance displays and militarization and coercion. Are we not seeing that in Minnesota? I mean, I realize that not everybody lives in Minnesota and maybe you don't even live in the United States, but I don't think you could escape the fact that we have a militarization going on in Minnesota where the back is, oh, we'll leave if you do this, which is against state law. So it's the power of the federal government trying to seize the power that the states have. And in the United States, the states have a lot of power. So let's hope they use it wisely. Okay, it's going to be people versus power. This is the beginning. We're going to feel this already, but we're going to continue to feel it for another 6 to 12 weeks. Okay? Mass systems that'll be dealing with resources, secrets, finances, and shared assets. This eclipse aggravates large-scale financial and power redistribution themes. Bear that in mind. Okay, old systems of control, micromanaging, fixing reality is an old system. Okay? The new system is surrender, disillusion, spiritual, collective awakening. I've already talked about it. You just can't manage your way out of this. This applies personally and collectively. Okay? There's going to be a lot of confusion, idealization, emotional persuasion, propaganda potential. We can expect fast reactions, impulsive actions. No patience. No patience. It's kind of volatile. The energy of this chart is kind of volatile. It's emotionally driven decisions which will be followed by immediate actions. It's not a subtle eclipse. There's an identity, a collapse, a systematic exposure, and forced realignments that will be occurring as a result of this eclipse. So expect leadership legitimacy crisis, mass psychological turning points. I kept talking about turning points. I said things are flipping. Even football games were like, boom. Okay, so expect that. Sudden break in alliances, I think that's happening. Public awakening that cannot be reversed. Technology and networks overriding traditional authority. Yeah, because we have social media and we're working with AI. Now, I'm going to be the first person to tell you, as a person who worked with AI, we're at least a generation away from where anybody should worry about losing their job. Because the whole next generation, you're going to have to teach this AI. That's all I'm saying. Because this eclipse sits on the ascendant, it will manifest. It's not just theorized, okay? Basically, there's a lot of trigger times there's going to be a lot of triggering to this. It's what they call a keystone chart. It's like a cornerstone chart, okay? Now, basically what we're looking at here in this next section is the collective event becoming personalized and visible. In other words, I don't think we're going to be able to fall asleep anymore with politics. I used to complain about that in the 80s. Everybody's sleeping. Don't they see what's happening? And then, boom, okay? The ascendant moon, the ascendant sun reinforces the public mood, and that's going to be fused by what's going on. There's events that will, this is all because of the Uranus, that will grab the person, body, life directly. In other words, there's no escaping here. You can't just sit back and say, I'm not going to pay attention to that. I think you need to at times, but it's just going to be hard to get away from. It's a public-facing turning point, changes to who I am and where I stand. See, we're going to become aware of those things because it's going to be important. This is kind of a dark time, and I like that this is in here. It's going to explode. This is what I was talking about. This is hate. It's exposure of the rot, the decay, the contamination, the scandal, the breakdown of old problems resurfacing. What was hidden, denied, or under the floorboards surfaces and cannot be put back. This is Uranus pulling that rug right out from under us. This is not a little hard. It's a purge energy. So expect some shock, reversals, disruptions, breaking continuity, and sudden awakenings. This is going to cause abrupt events, sudden shifts of alliances, volatility, shocking, the system of breaks. Okay, so there's basically what we're trying to do is weigh out some of this stuff. Like, when I mean weigh out, I mean make it more, where's the equality? That's what we're going to start asking. And it's going to have ripple effects, system-wide consequences. It's going to affect network cascades. Okay, well, that means that stuff is going to not necessarily hit the TV. I wouldn't bother, but get to the internet. Okay. Now, it's just like one headline after another, bigger events, wiping out the stuff that happened the day before. So that's why it is okay to take breaks now and then. There's a real authority reality check going on here, and official decisions are going to be looked at, institutional limits, endings, accountability. So expect some resignations and some closures, adamitas. The system draws a hard line. This is where the eclipse becomes policy, law, judgment, restriction, and formal outcomes. Remember, we're going to be feeling this for another possible 12 weeks, okay? The fog hits leadership. Expect that, okay? And this is because the Neptune and the midheaven are still involved because of that midheaven from this. I showed you. Well, it's right here. We can see it, okay, on this axis. There's going to be confusion, uncertainty, deception, and dissolving authorities because the leadership is losing clarity. Misdirection, narratives are now collapsing. So that misdirection's going away, And that's what I was trying to talk about when I talked about the Poseidon. There's a lack of trust, a loss of legitimacy, or leaders appearing weak and unmoored. Remember, we can see this in the government, but what about in your personal life? And by the way, this can also be for people who have elderly parents, because their lack of clarity isn't necessarily going to be there. This is the classic structure versus collapse combo. Basically, we're going to be looking at a lot of decay, contamination that also affects the body. Now, the EPA, as of, is no longer regulating things. Well, let's talk about it. Younger people are dying of cancer. Younger and younger all the time because of the contamination and the toxins that are in our environment, okay? We, the people, are becoming aware of that decay that's affecting our bodies, the environment, the public space, and daily lives, and how they're affected. There's public fear, there's grief, there's emotional toxicity, but the people are getting it. Okay, so this public distress is going to affect scandals that affect us all, okay? Or literal unhealthy atmospheres, socially or physically. They are both in the asteroids. There is a confirmation of this theme. So we have actions, attack, and initiate. This is where I go into that Palace Mars I was talking about. There's strategic tactics, political intelligence, and pattern recognition that will be occurring. Calculated moves, political movers, strategic confrontations, and planned actions, not just impulsive violence. Oh, this is going to be an interesting time. This midpoint is especially relevant with an eclipse, this one, which is that Sun, Moon equals Mars Palace, which I showed you. It's right here, okay? It's talking about it's definitely going to be about technical counter moves that are going to be approached particularly on a political level. Okay, so what we're expecting here is a highly public eclipse that personalizes a collective event, exposes rot, breaks in continuity, spreads through systems, networks, forces institutional consequences, while leadership credibility dissolves and triggers tactical action. Wow. Wow. Let's look at the asteroids for a little confirmation. Okay, welcome to my slideshow. So I did this for another lecture. So our last few minutes, I want to go through the asteroids that are occurring within this eclipse. So we're going to first look at the Sun-Moon axis, and then we're going to look at the Aries point axis for our last few minutes of the video. These are the points I talked about. So you can write them down because there they are. Mutables, again, just to go through, is Pisces, Sagittarius, Virgo, Gemini. Fixed, Taurus, Aquarius, Leo, and Scorpio. Cardinal, Capricorn, Cancer, Libra, Aries, and again, fixed. Okay, so just for our education, all right? Here's the chart. So I just want to kind of show you where these things showed up. Look at this. You know, these 2 points on here were, to me, like, wow, okay? The sun itself and the moon. But look at this one, the one off. Wow, a lot there. So let's look at these. All right, so now we're going to go with, let me get this back up. What did I do? There we go. Okay, so now we're going to look at melancholia, which is somber, depressed. We're going to expect that. Authority is high on this. So authority, but also credibility, our own credibility. Coin, value, okay? So we're looking at these are the actual Sun, Moon asteroids that are in this axis. I am actually going to skip ahead. I was wondering why these are still on here, but I realized what I had done. I actually grouped them. I'll keep going. So the Hopi is prejudiced and attacks. We're seeing that. Risk is taking chances. Pain level is not only the pain, but it's also the intellectual problem solving that results from that pain, whether it's physical or emotional. Pythia, intuition, misinterpret. Okay, the retrograde really does cause more misinterpretation, so beware of that. Apollo retrograde tells us that sometimes we're just naive, really slow to learn, and we go against the odds. All right. Eurydice is dependency, who and what we're dependent on. Luni is moonlight, but it also relates to sleep and the inability to sleep. Okay, that's going to come up a lot. It's retrograde, so it can also be about repeating patterns. It's the lunar thing, the emotional thing, that suddenly become conscious, like, why do I keep doing that? Why do I keep enabling that? Fairness as it relates to justice, for fair. Minerva is like Pallas. So isn't it funny? It shows up too, which is again strategy. Brace, prepare for impact. But according to Martha, it can also be a pair of something. Libitina is sadness, tears, and loss. Merlin is wisdom and patience, but it's also that ability to actualize something, to know it's going to take a while, but you're going to actualize it. Here we have Lima for kindness, sympathy. It's an entryway to make adjustments. Hermes is messaging, messages, news, and it's also the trickster. There's our disinformation possibilities. Morpheus, here we go with the dream stuff, is dreams, visions, and nightmares. Okay? There's a lot of stuff about sleep here, and I don't think people are sleeping very well right now. Born is about the reinvention, beginning again. It is about us reinventing ourselves. With Walker, you can move forward into transition. Sly is cunning. Somnium is also dreamlike. It's that in-between stage. Here again, not sleeping well. Alicia is emotional extremity. It's really, they call it an emotional extremity, but it's extreme emotional that can be self-destructive, self-undoing. Okay, so it's part of us that becomes extremely emotional. Now, what I did with these, and I can breeze through it since I went through those, is I actually grouped them. So when I got ready for this other lecture, I literally got rid of those that we just saw. Here we look at the recognition group. This is like us recognizing. We don't feel it. We feel depressed. We're so dependent on things. And we're dealing with prejudices and attacks. I mean, this could be anything that people are prejudiced. I mean, these guys are prejudiced against women, for God's sake. I don't know how they think they get here, but, you know, it's so ridiculous what people are prejudiced against. Loony, again, is that repeating pattern and becoming conscious, and Somnia is dreamlike, the in-between stage. So all of a sudden, we're beginning to realize, you know what? I'm not sleeping well. I don't feel good. I relate that I'm dependent on too many things. And then we get to the correction of the condition and the recalibration, which is where fair comes in. Coin and risk. This is like not just the value of money, but also our ethical values. And what's at risk here? Alicia was self-undoing, Sly with the I like this. This came out of the AI. Subtle survival strategies. That's also having to be clever. Pain level, we got to solve this issue. We're in pain. We have to deal with this. Okay? Brace for our reinforcement. Crone, authority, backbone, and credibility. That's our authority, our credibility. Lima, kindness, sympathy, and the entryway to adjustments. Then we come to vision and rebirth. Merlin is strategic wisdom. Okay? Merlin's wisdom, period. Okay? Hermes can be articulation. Pythia with Apollo, both retrograde, and by the way, they are running together, is intuition, but there can be a lot of misinterpretation because we're actually very naive at times and we're slow. And, it is also about going against the odds, which goes with risk, which we just saw. Morpheus is reshaped, reimagined vision. Okay, so it's a dream. It's what can you dream it? If we can dream it, we can make it. Born is talking about our rebirth, and Walker is about moving forward. Okay, here is our next area. We're going to look at the axis points on the Aries point. And here again, look at right around Neptune, Saturn. Woohoo! 8 asteroids right with all that's going on. I love this because the asteroids give us even more details to what it is we are looking at. So let me move on. Our next asteroid, these will all be in their categories to finish up. Under blame, deception, and manipulation, we have Weasley, which is paranoia, fear, anxiety, which then leads to faulty attribution. In other words, you're not going to make good decisions if you're anxious. Come on. Patsy, scapegoat. Who are we going to use for a patsy? Okay, because that's what con men and scam artists do, and we've got 2 of them. Laverna's the deception itself. Doesn't mean that somebody isn't going to throw another it doesn't mean you can't throw a Kronos under the bus. You can. But is it a con man that's doing the deed? Ballstrom is incessant talking. It's also about intellectual justification. Think about that. If somebody talks all the time, they're either full of BS and they're really not telling you anything. Dolero is the cost of the whole thing, okay? But then we've got money value also in here. So again, these are things that they're just jumping off, and it's repeatable themes. Melpomene is that we're looking at tragedies and tragic, and there's been a number of those, not even just in this country. Canada just had a school shooting. I mean, literally tragic events are taking place here. Nymph is the seduction and the power struggle, a power imbalance. We're just going to be struggling to get it back. But nymph is seduction, and some people have been seduced. Here's the medical things that we were referring to when we were talking about it earlier with things that are destroying our health. It's like we're descent into, but we're leaving the World Health Organization. I mean, I'm using Washington, D.C. here, but think about how bad that is. How bad it is for Polaris and Hippocrates. So it's medical ethics and physician treatment, but it's also about how some of the things that are happening with our chronos are definitely going to affect our health. That's the EPA stuff. Here we have truth and illumination, something we can look forward to. Pallas is about the recognition, the pattern recognition. Now remember, Pallas is also strategic. It's also about people saying things they think you want to hear. It's politics. But politics is going to turn corners now, I think. I think we're going to start seeing some fighting now. Urania is telling us that we're using things like astrology, higher knowledge, and computer programming. Ironically, I'm using AI anymore when I work with you, just to try to organize myself better. Trust me, the amount of mistakes made on both sides is pretty staggering. Varda is the truth, but it also represents a light bearer because it's the truth that lights up the room. There's that Poseidon moving. Myers is our intuitive mind, and actually that is not in there. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take that out right here because it's not in